It's lovely to drop into the field that you already created here on day 2 for the Open Future Forum. Yesterday was incredible, actually. Day 1 surprised me in very interesting ways, and it had a level of depth and quality of being that I wasn't sure we'd get to with civic infrastructure, honestly. I thought maybe that would be saved for some of the topics today and tomorrow, but it actually went deeper than I imagined, and I'm so grateful, actually, to have this experience of this incredibly rich, global, truly global community that's been committed to gathering here over these 3 days. So those of you who joined yesterday, thanks for returning. And those of you who are just kicking off with us today, we're thrilled and excited to have the opportunity to weave so many incredible projects and practitioners and thought leaders and community leaders and experts and technologists and funders and really future makers. And that's really what we're in service to, is sort of honoring the lessons and the insights and the wisdoms of the past. As we said yesterday, for us, the Open Future Coalition is a harvesting, or the Open Future Forum is a harvest from our efforts with Open Future Coalition for the last 2 years. But really, it feels like a culmination of, a lifetime of work. And so many of us are reaching such a interesting crossroads and pinnacle moment to determine how we want to take the experiences we've had thus far, the work that we've done, the lessons that we've learned, the wisdom we've inherited, the ancestral trauma we've inherited, the corrupt systems that are not life affirming, that are also reaching their pinnacle apex that cannot continue any longer, and deciding how we want to move forward, choosing together what kind of future we aim our arrow towards, and then roll up our sleeves and work towards. And then, roll up our sleeves and dig new ground for and compost old paradigms to be fertile soil for seeds that we want to plant for a hopeful future. And today, I'm excited to actually kick off right away on the ground. Yesterday, we kind of got to our demonstration projects a little ways in, but today somehow it feels appropriate with our farmers in the room to actually talk about what are we doing that's tangibly working with the earth as a symbiotic partner in this transformative time. How are we remembering original practice that was always in balance and reciprocity, and we were always regenerators and co-creators with a living world? How are we remembering ourselves as part of a community of a living system? How are we innovating with the advancement and the giant brains we've formed along the way? How are we innovating new and interesting ways to approach an ancient practice of earth tending? And how are we transforming our communities and the global community at a time when food systems and global commodities and global supply chains are deeply showing their fragility? So this idea of incredible resilience, community resilience at regional levels is, to me, it's everything. And if we aren't actively seeking to fortify community resilience and then learning as a global community how to better ensure the security of our food sheds, our watersheds, our health and well-being, our vitality, leveraging our artisans, reskilling ourselves, remembering how to provide for our families, our children, our community, working together ahead of any, change and shift that may, or may not occur in your particular community. But it becomes a way of life. This time of crises can also be a time of incredible, as you just said, Melanie, opportunity to transform and realign and reassess and reconsider. So that's the frame for dropping into our global roundtable today. We've invited some incredible practitioners to share their dirt in the ground soil work, the work that they're doing to support practices of place and farmers of place and cultivators of place, growers. And I'm really looking forward to hearing some project examples and give the floor over to some of you here in the space. And for those listening in, I hope to have a conversation where we walk away feeling curious, inspired, hopeful, and maybe recommitted, I guess is a word. I wonder, like, where's our constant recommitment to what we as individuals also want to practice? I know that I chose to leave the city and move out here on a 65-acre farm with my husband, who's a regenerative farmer. And it's humbling every day, the amount of effort and toil that it takes to work with the land. It's so humbling, but it's so satisfying. And not everybody has that privilege and fortune. So that's why things like the conversation around food justice and access to food coming up later today feels so imperative. But I do think there's a bridge to be built between those who do have land that are tending and cultivating and those who live in places that I think we can recultivate our imagination about food, even in urban environments, and access to healthy food and the connection and relationship between farmers being supported and them supporting communities of all kinds, rural and urban. So with that, enough of my soapbox, other than just to welcome you all back. And I'm going to kick today off. Actually, I'd love, Katharina, you've been on for a little bit. I'd love to hear a female voice. I'll be honest, there's many incredible women farmers been in our session. We only have a few, but I think it'd be wonderful to start, Katharina, with the work that you're doing. And then we'll pass that around. So please feel free to go ahead and offer your share.
And first, I just want to jump in to thank our co-conveners for today, and then we'll hand it over to Katharina. So I want to thank North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University for sponsoring today's forum, as well as all of our co-conveners who've made this possible. The American Sustainable Business Network, Bluefin Investment, the Eco Restoration Alliance, El Puente, Global Unity, the Guild of Future Architects, Heartland P5, Imagine World, the Institute of Ecotechnics, Intergen Family, Kinship Earth, Partnerships for Change, Pro-Social World, Reconsider, Toxic Free Future for Our Children, and Tringle Foundation. Thank you so much to all of you for the co-convening. And over to you, Katharina.
Thank you so much. That gave me time to organize myself a bit. It was very helpful. But I don't know, you cannot see what I wanted to share with you. Just a second. Can you see that? Is it visible?
Can. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So maybe that's okay.
You might want to extend the screen, Katharina, so that we see the whole thing.
I'm trying to, but actually I have some issues with the computer. I think it's okay, right? Okay. Can you sort of see it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, good. Yes. Wonderful. So the laboratory for the future. What I'm going to share is I grew up in Portugal. And that region is very deep to my heart. So when after studying, becoming an ecologist and working with the soil in different parts, I was called to come back home basically and develop this initiative. We talked about the grief in the beginning, and this landscape is really deeply transporting this grief as it is at the brink of desertification. And that's what I'm sharing today briefly is just a few learnings that we did on a bioregional level of working there. And before I start, one learning was when we talk about bioregional or bioregions at the moment, what I realized and just observed internationally, but especially in Europe maybe, or in these initiatives, is that there's still a separation. Sometimes bioregional, also financed by the European Union, it's about nature conservation. And I realized that even there is a separation between, just you rewild, which I love as a concept, and you just leave nature as it is. But then where should the humans be? And actually one concept or one thing that I deeply believe in is as actually how can we see ourselves as part of nature and really be nature? And the term that we have been using is regeneration by use in this case. So basically not excluding humans, but trying to find back into that area. So just to give you a little bit of what this is about. Let me see if I can walk it down. So where is that? We're speaking about the south of Portugal. So it's in the semi-arid climate zone. So this is a climate zone. It's a periphery of Europe, but it could be anywhere in the semi-arid climate zone and in the periphery of not really reached by a lot of infrastructure. So what the situation is that the soil are really degraded. People have left because there are no economic ways of making the living. Many farmers have given up. There are only 5 inhabitants per square kilometers left. Very, very difficult situation there. And at the same time, it's a place that I really love, with a lot of beauty, with a lot of resilience, with 5,000 years of archaeological findings of human civilization and actually no signs of human war. It's a very interesting place to work in, and a meeting point between cultures, between, you know, a lot of this Arab part that was part of a Sufi kingdom, and a lot of interesting influences that were connecting the Mediterranean. So this region, and actually we started from the very beginning to work with the archaeologists to understand the place, to understand what was there. And I found a quote that I would love to share with you, which is, it comes from the Roman times, and it points back to a time, because apparently already during the Roman times, there have been exploitation in that region and the forest has been cut. And we found later out, you know, this area has been a mining site, gold, silver, copper, since 5,000 years, since the Phoenicians. But in the Roman times, from the Roman times, we found a quote that said, a squirrel could jump from Rome to this place without hitting the soil. So it jumped from tree to tree. So you can imagine the oak trees must have been so dense over whole Europe that this squirrel could just jump over the trees to get there. And that, whenever I get sad, this, or just lose hope, this picture comes with me. And actually we shared it with the people in that region. And that was very important to regain that vivid image of what this place has been. So this is basically the situation that we were in. So the question, and I would just share, obviously very, very short with you, what we've learned. And as some of these findings, when you find a landscape like this that is really in drought and desertification or at the brink, one farm or changing on a farm level will not make it. And we see many also investment funds now, Regen ag funds that invest in farms. This is wonderful, and it's a whole new story, and we can talk about it. But I feel it's not anymore enough to do the change on farm level. And also, many of the instruments for financing, they require the farmers basically to sell the land or have the land as a collateral. And that's not the reality of the social needs of many people that live there, that are there, and they just need the help to do it themselves. So our finding was that working on the farm level is not enough, and we need sort of community processes with everyone, with the farmers, but also with those that produce, with the community, with the schools, the kids, and all generations. And I told it before when I started, I believe that the pathway of what we call regeneration by use, so not separating conservation from then intensive production or even in the cities, which can also be part of the ecosystem, but really going a pathway of agroecological transition. And then we found more through, you know, just how life takes us without planning, but we found the schools are a wonderful entry point for change. They may be in Europe 15%, just the kids and the youth of the population. In other parts of the world, that's obviously different, like in, I don't know, in Ghana or in different parts, this is much higher than in Europe. But they are in any case 100% of our future. So schools are a wonderful entry point. And art, that is something that we found, celebrating around food, and it needs a lot of collaboration on different levels. And I will show you how we did it over the last years and continue to do it. So we started with celebration. And I really say that it sounds strange if you come to such a place and in the middle of that grief and everyone lost their jobs. But yes, starting around celebration in the market hall, and integrating from the beginning the different generation, in this case 5 grandmothers every month that invite to share the food, and inviting the farmers to contribute as a community action, creating the social rhythm of a change in a region. So really, in this case, a monthly event. And the next point of change that made a difference was courage. So the courage that one needs to go first, because you can't talk about regeneration. You need someone that does it, a farmer that does it. Otherwise, other farmers will not believe it, even if you tell them the best things and bring the best experts. So we found, luckily, one farmer and one land plot to do the change and build an agroecological pilot and demonstration area where you drive from Lisbon and you drive through these last standing oaks and the nearly desert red land. And then after hours, you see this and it's lush and it's green and it's just making a difference from the bare soil. So this is really seeing it works. And our experience was we did that with the help of a real pioneer with Ernst Götsch from Brazil, who has coined the word of syntropic farming. And so we really see if you work with these agroecological impulses and agroforestry, in this case, successional agroforestry, the earth remembers so quickly and the soil remembers, so it comes really back. And so this courageous thing of one needs to step up and do it is very important, but that's not enough. The next thing was that we were asked to transform all the school gardens in the region. And that was more because they didn't have enough, it was an idea, it came up because they didn't have enough teachers and they wanted to have something nice. So we transformed the school gardens into these plots, like syntropic farming plots, and started teaching the children how to grow their own food and how to restore the soil and how to restore the water cycle. And they are the sons and the daughters of the farmers. So we didn't need to preach to anyone. It was their own children. And we included the grandparents so that the grandparents can really be part of that, take care of the seedlings and be part of the knowledge transfer and support in some ways. And that turned out to be a lot of, giving a lot of self-esteem, not only to the kids. And then we said, well, maybe we can't start with the big plots, but what we could do is regenerate abandoned gardens. So we started to create like a belt around the main municipal village of different, in the meantime, it's 9 different land plots, villages from elderly homes, but also from big farmers that had these old Phoenician gardens that were abandoned, nothing there. So step by step, garden by garden, we developed a program where we've regenerated these places, and we found new coming farmers and built up an education and training program for the new coming farmers and for people from the village that would like to take over responsibility for a smaller land plot. So they get a training of 1 year on the pilot and demonstration area and on regeneration, and then they get their own plot for a contract of several years. And we even fundraised for an agrarian basic income so that they can get started and integrate that into a distribution system, because no farmer will distribute or will start doing something like that highly risky if there's not a safety net around it, how to sell the vegetables or the fruits. So this is the shorter land plots. And then, as I said, the educational part, because even starting with the little ones, but then developing a program for new coming farmers or for people from the village that would like to become regenerative farmers. So this 2 years learning and also for the apprenticeships and for the vocational education, because we realized we did that together with the existing institutions and with international experts, because we realized if these vocational education, which means the 15 to 18 years old, what we've been telling them all over the world is that if you want to be someone, leave the countryside, go to the city, don't become a farmer, don't be a farmer. And we need to reverse this and say, well, it's wonderful. If you would like to become a steward of the land, this is something that it really appreciates. And it's cool to be that. And that's the future, actually, and to invest in that, in exactly these regions in the periphery. So this is what we still try to do, and we did. So that obviously revitalizes and gives a different self-esteem for that generation, that it's worth staying. And then it's very fast driving through, working continuously, and we don't have it all solved. It's still a very difficult path, but working on distribution channels, short circuits, and really working on different ways of how we can collectively, team up the farmers, but enable things where they can sell in the markets, and also enable economic ways. We could go very deep in a very different economic session here of how to create cooperative structures or food networks that really work on the local level, to serve the food, organically growing regenerative food to the local community. And one thing that we realized, which really can make a difference in this context, can be the local canteens, and that can be school canteens, it can be elderly home canteens, and it could be also, you know, if there are businesses of any kind that have canteens, and that can secure the local demand. It's challenging path to get there. It's not easy. Sometimes by regulation, it's very difficult to enter these contracts. And then also if you work with agriculture and you work in a situation where climate change is really hitting in and you have drought situations, what do you do when you can't deliver? And so I'm not, the reality shows that this path is not solved at all, but I believe that this can be a part of the solution to go further. And then we realized, obviously, with our little gardens, that's beautiful, but we will not be able to really change the whole landscape, thousands of hectares of degraded land. So we needed to scale up. So that needs even more collaborations. So what we started, and it was a multi-year preparation, basically, to start a 3-year program with 25 big landowners that committed, and 5 municipalities, and different actors, and also collaborating between countries. In this case, it is with a program in Andalusia on the Spanish side, to introduce other regenerative practices for the farmers, more on holistic grazing and keyline management, to find ways of changing the big degraded areas. So that's a 3-year, they commit to a 3-year pathway of constant learning, peer-to-peer, teaching each other basically, and becoming inputs from experts. That is targeting an area of 10,000 hectares, which I believe is 26,000 acres when you translate that into acres. So this is a bit, I would say, the menu of what we have been doing. And my learning is really, it's not enough to do it on one farm. It's a collaborative way from an entire region that needs everyone. Thank you.
Katharina, thank you so much. I appreciate the holism of the model that you just shared, and the richness of sort of the cascading degradation that happens when we sort of aren't in relationship with land, and then the cascading benefits that start to happen as you return to the land and encourage those next generations to continue those skills and that relationship, really. And so that's what I really saw, was the relationships that are forged by the relationship with the land. The community is forged through those relationships. It's such a beautiful example, and I greatly appreciate you sharing today. I'd like to pass that next over to Geoffrey Kwala, whose project is working in Uganda, Ugandan Permaculture Consortium, and have him share a bit of the work that they're doing in Uganda. And again, Katharina, thank you so much. Geoffrey, over to you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for inviting me. Just shortly going to start sharing my screen. Yes, so I'm Geoffrey, and I'm part of a really nice, interesting project in Uganda. Our name is the Ugandan Permaculture Consortium, and so what we do is we try to actually work on a sustainable transition. So how can we, as a consortium consisting of 14 different members, how can we actually make green transition happen? So here we look at systemic transformation, but then also we try to integrate different strategies, how to ensure sustainable change. And also, as Katharina was saying, collaboration is also one of our key metrics with outside partners, for instance, renewable energies like the Biogas Alliance in Uganda as well. So really trying to emphasize on collaboration. And here, so what we did first was to establish a network basically of regenerative practitioners. And some of them, they work with entrepreneurs, they work with marginalized groups, for example, in refugee settlements, they work with handicapped people, others have indigenous seed banks, so they save seeds. There's some of the groups work on policy, advocacy, that work with, for example, also small-scale farmers, women, infrastructures, communities, the youth, fashion, for example, as well. So really trying to create a network of organizations so that we can, in the end of the day, have a holistic approach or create a niche sector of the agriculture sector actually in Uganda. So here we really try to emphasize on, as I said, collaboration as well. And here's some of our values, which are quite, not really maybe that obvious for a lot of other organizations, but we really try to work on the values. But maybe also more informative would be focus areas, such as obviously environmental health, so really focusing on regenerative practices and transitioning here, access to information and resources, so creating this network as a community of practice, looking into research and advocacy, so also engaging with universities in Uganda, but then also in Copenhagen, for example, as well. We look at economic empowerment and profitability, so we also look at alternative economies, such as cryptocurrencies, and really creating opportunities for microfinancing those who do permaculture, so permaculture in homesteads, but then also in the schools as well, for example. And we look at capacity building, community engagement. So the question is, how can we ensure actually a sustainable transition, right? And because I come from this more, let's say, academic background, there's some methodologies that we're looking into, which one of them is collective impact methodology, for example. And collective impact means that as a collective, we can generate an impact such as environmental or social, but there are some things which are required, so which is why we built a working group. So we have 5 to 6 members working on the consortium, working on the strategy, really trying to emphasize what kind of steps are we going to take in order to realize the vision that we created beforehand. Also, another method is the multi-level perspective, which looks at the agriculture sector from multiple perspectives. And here, one of the important things is that we found out several transition pathways. So really trying to understand windows of opportunities, such as, for instance, if there would be a crisis, such as the Corona crisis, or a refugee crisis, a climate crisis, this would disrupt basically the agriculture sector. And because of that, movements such as the permaculture movements or niche practitioners such as ourselves, we can seize these opportunities. So we look at strategic niche management here as well. So how can we use these transition pathways and really try to formulate strategies in order to get to their goal, basically. Also, we look at coupled innovation. So creating multi-stakeholder networks, and then looking at innovations such as the cryptocurrency, for example, but then also biogas digesters. How can we collaborate in order to really transform that particular sector into a green sector? Also, we look at co-design, collaborative design, participatory design, community-based approaches, and strategic design in the end of the day as well. And here are the first pilot projects basically of the consortium. So the consortium was actually only established this year, and some of our members here as well today. So here in the first pilot project, we try to seize the opportunity that also Katharina was saying before in her presentation, which is the educational sector. So really trying to emphasize on school projects, for instance, in the north, in the west, and in the east. And I'll just let you know of one example in the Kwala region. So here the focus is to create a local system to ensure 1 or 2 meals per day for the school children, to reduce school dropouts by creating permaculture kitchen gardens, and also in combination with possibly seeds, cryptocurrency, but not necessarily, so that in the end of the day we can reduce the amount of school fee paid in the school, or would like to create a way so that school child can actually microfinance their own school education here. So this is still something that we need to develop, and it is still being conceptualized. So what we try to do is we try to test out first different innovations, such as, for instance, high-low is one of the innovations that we're testing in this pilot project. And high-low is basically also a platform to visualize and map out farmers, organizations, so that they can actually share resources, they can write up inquiries, and so on. Another tool that we're using is the agroecological criteria tool, which assesses basically the social and environmental impact on how much does the project actually contribute to a transformation in the agricultural sector, basically. So this is on the right. And as I said, seeds as well is one of the cryptocurrencies that we were looking into, which might be used in order to create decentralized economical value for communities, but farmers as well, and possibly even schools too. Yeah, so we're really looking forward in the project, so really trying to emphasize on creating strategy, and also to raise up the scope of the project. And for instance, the scope is that in the Kwala region, for instance, that we first look at 10 different schools, but then scale it up to 40 different schools actually. So really trying to emphasize on a large amount, which is then uniquely assessed. So each school is different, and each school has their own their own uniqueness to it, right? So this is something that we would like to emphasize as well. And and then in the end of the day, we would also want to discuss with the state and with the government, after really being secure in the country as a consortium, or as really practitioners which have been doing these tests, and which not just tests, but like who know about the challenges and the problems and the insights and the positive aspects of the project as well. So really refining the projects in the end of the day, and serving as a consultant for the government in Uganda is one of the goals, for example, as well, which can then also be seen as another opportunity. And yeah, we're looking for team members, we're looking for really active, engaging network, we're looking for funding, volunteers, tech people, admin, project management, business, and all sorts of people we would like to connect to. So yeah, so this is basically the project that we do in Uganda. Thanks a lot. And if you would like to connect, please connect. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, Geoffrey, thank you so much. Again, it's sort of like watching the worlds combine and whole systems thinking. And I really appreciate that innovation of sort of more modern resourcing, with also returning the vitality to village. Really appreciate this example. And for everybody, please do feel free to, in the chat, whether you've been presenting and you want to add contact information or additional resources, but also those of you just in the space, please feel free. We love an active chat. So we're welcoming you to shamelessly plug your projects, the things you're looking for, the things that you can offer. Let's resource each other even in this space while we're here. And Geoffrey, thank you so much for sharing about your work. I am going to hand that over next to Dan Krull from Regen Partners. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, Dan, and having you layer into the conversation. Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. How's everybody doing today? You can't answer because we're all muted. So hopefully you can hear me.
There was a lot of thumbs up, Dan.
Okay, cool. Sign if you're happy. It's kind of cool having all these smart people doing good stuff. We actually talk about all of you very often when we're discussing how we're going to move forward. What often happens is we'll look at one of the maps of our plans or one of the places we're working on, and then we'll fly, on Google Earth over to another map, and we see all that land in between our projects, and we think, man, there's just we're just a drop in the bucket no matter how much we do. And all of this really relies on everyone else with the same good ideas doing the same things in their own communities. So it's heartening, I guess, to see this many people gathered here who have a lot of the similar concepts and ideas that we do. So I wasn't really sure what the format of this was, so I don't have a pretty presentation to show any of you, but I'll just tell you a little bit about what we're doing. Regen Partners is located in the central United States, Kansas City, Great Bend, Kansas, and we have several projects. And basically, you know, I could say we have a few things that started us off on the path that we're on. One of them, if you look at a map of the US, our ranch in Great Bend, Kansas is just to the west of that desertification line as we're watching the US desertify. And so one of our ideas is to hold that line and push it back and re-green the areas that we've destroyed. And the other idea is that in the United States, farming has become such an unprofitable and unattractive way of making a living that the average farmer now is in the age range of about 65, which means sometime in the next 10 years, huge amounts of land is going to change hands and change stewardship. And so we see that as an opportunity to insert a different type of stewardship to kind of change things around, hold that line. So our main goal in creating our very new company is to use ecosystem mimicry to create profitable farm systems and to, you know, build as many of those as we possibly can, while at the same time creating an alternative food distribution system that would handle local products and regeneratively grown products. And one of the things we realized very early on in that is that if you know the right real estate people, obtaining land is fairly easy, strangely enough, if you can get the capital for it. Converting the land, you know, there's so many great examples out there of how to actually manage property using regenerative practices. That's really not the problem. One of our main issues is people to actually run the farms. And so very early on, we started to develop a training program, which we call the Farmer Fast Track. And we're using that to train new farmers to run these farms as we develop them. And then the goal is down the line, we haven't actually successfully done this yet, but our goal is to find pathways for land ownership for our farmer trainees and employees. Like I mentioned, we're in the central United States. We're focusing on three main stable, profitable operations within each of our farms, and that would be the production of trees, then beekeeping and rotational grazing, multi-species rotational grazing. So we found that those three enterprises are functional on any operation within the range that we operate in, and they become a sort of a stable central unit for any farm into which other hold-ons can plug in and you know, contextually based hold-ons. So let's say we have a ranch that's heavily wooded, and maybe mushroom production makes a lot of sense there because there's a lot of opportunities for that. Whereas, you know, out in Western Kansas, mushroom production doesn't really make sense, but something else might. And to use those stable central farms as hubs, and those hubs would generate new farmers, you know, materials, animals, trees, you know, swarms of bees to then populate other farms and spread out from there. And at the same time, building, you know, the infrastructure requirements for this alternative food system. So it's a on a small scale in our local region, it's a huge project. When you compare it to what we need to do in order to continue to survive on this planet, it's a tiny drop in the bucket. So we're being as ambitious as we can, and things are going really well. I dropped the website on the chat there if you want to check us out and reach out and say hey, or if you ever want to come visit a farm if you happen to be out in the Midwest region. But that's the long and the short of what we're doing. I hope that was exciting compared to some of the pretty pictures and conversation you're going to hear today. So.
Dan, thank you so much. Yeah, it's essential, that point that you made about the desertification that's rampantly taking over. You know, here it's happening in Portugal, like it's a global phenomenon, but how much we have to learn together about how to reverse desertification. Tomorrow we have several sessions actually on the role of vegetation, soil, and water in cooling and rehydrating the planet, and how essential that is. And there's so much that needs to be refocused on how to approach simply working with landscapes. Like, desertification is not an inevitability, it's a poor choice that we're making. And so I always appreciate hearing stories about approaches that create that viability back in the soils and in the lands, even especially in grasslands and savanna lands, which are actually incredibly rich ecosystems and don't have to also equal desertification and lack of fertility. So I'm really appreciating the work that you all are doing kind of in the belt, in the American farm belt there. And with that, I'm going to hand that over actually to, and yeah, thank you very much for joining us today, Dan. I know you had some other obligations, so we're really happy to have you with us. I'm going to hand that over to Chris Hardy, who is working with a friend of mine down in Southern Oregon and has Hardy seeds. So I'm looking forward, I think it's a nice segue to also working in grasslands and dryland farming, I believe, with seeds. So if you want to hop in there, we welcome you, Chris. Thank you so much.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me? You can hear me. Okay, good. Hi, thanks, Jamaica. Thanks all. Wow, so much amazing things happening in the farming world these days. It's exciting to be a part of the movement, to regenerate our soils and give back to the land. My name is Chris Hardy. I'm founder of Hardy Seeds in Ashland. We grow a lot of vegetables, herbs, flowers, seeds, and over the past 3 years, we have been involved in a heritage grains project, and we partnered with the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, and we brought in seeds not only from the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, but from other seed companies in the US and friends that have been growing grains. And 3 years on this heritage grain project, we're now growing more than 100 varieties of grains from all over the world, from places like Kazakhstan, Ladakh, a lot of places where I've traveled, Armenia and Georgia and Ethiopia, Egypt, the Caucasus Mountains where many of these grains originated. And I think we've had tremendous success over the years, and we've done this mostly using no irrigation water. And this is in historic drought that we have seen. Currently, the Pacific Northwest in the United States is experiencing a 1,200-year drought. And last year, I can tell you, we had 116 degree was our high. And over a number of days, it was like 112, 115, 116 degrees. It was so crazy. And I'm excited to report that we have been growing also a quinoa variety here in Southern Oregon that has been doing real well for us, considering how dry and hot it is here in Southern Oregon. And we've been growing this variety since 2008. Even against the suggestions of other growers who are like, oh, you can't do quinoa down there, it's too hot, and you got to like be up in the mountains, and Bolivia and Peru, places that I also spent time, that I was really fired up about getting some of this quinoa planted. But we've been growing many varieties in our trials over the years, and have found a couple of varieties that do excellent for very hot and dry climate that we have here in Northern California, Southern Oregon, in the bioregion. And what else can I say? The heritage grains, we're really excited about them. Visited Vandana Shiva years ago and her biodiversity farm, Navdanya, in the Dune Valley in northern India. And she was so fired up about how these heritage and older, the open pollinated varieties, the varieties that farmers have been saving for centuries, for generations, have higher tillering rates, and they produce more biomass. And so they give back more to the soil than they take. Whereas today's modern day wheat, I guess I can tell you one grower here in the Valley, Fry Family Farm. Some on the call may know Fry Family Farm. They're the largest market producer, certified organic market producer in Southern Oregon. They're one of our partner growers for this grain project to help us expand access to these precious, rare seeds here in the Valley. But Fry was growing an OSU barley. Oh God, I can't remember the variety name, but he was saying that it basically produced 1 or 2 or 3 tillers, and tillers are the side shoots. And those side shoots are kind of like an indicator of how much biomass the plant produces. But they send up this short, like maybe 24 inch, maybe a little taller than 24 inch barley, and the grain, and they produce mostly the grain. It's what people look for is the yield. And so we put our eggs all in this one basket of yield. And so what it has done is it's deprived our soils of the critical amount of carbon that we need to use less nutrients, use less water, just have healthier plants in general by increasing the soil organic matter. And some of these, I'd say the cool weather grains specifically, we're talking about barley, wheat, emmer, einkorn, spelt, kamut, what else am I? Rye and oats that we grow. Many of these, most of these have 15 to 20 to 30, and the einkorn and the emmer have like 30 to 40 to even 50 plus tillers. And it was just blew my mind actually getting into this work to see so much biomass being produced in this process. If I could do a real quick screen share, I think I could pull this up real quick. If there's time, Jamaica, I could just show folks.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. We probably have just a couple minutes here, but please go ahead and share.
Okay. Yep. How do I do that? Screen share. Oh boy. I don't know. I'm not sure how to do that. There's a little button on
your screen that should say screen share on the bottom dashboard.
Share. Okay, share photos. No, I got to give access. Oh, screen. Start broadcast. Okay, here we go. I guess this might get us there.
Oh yeah, you're on your phone. I see.
Is it going?
On your screen, yep. But what we see is more the prompter. Do you have up your content?
Okay. How do I?
There you go. Yep, we see it now. Oh yeah, beautiful.
Okay, you're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So growing. That's the Holus emmer there. Beautiful. This is wheat from Kazakhstan. This is a emmer from, I'm not sure, but that's our grains block. And it's only about 1/4 of an acre. And what's so exciting that I really want to make sure everybody on the call knows is that we have been growing these grains in partnership with about 15 other growers in the valley here. And we're everybody's like maybe taking on 1/4 of an acre, or some cases even just a 50-foot bed. And what we started with initially in our partnership with the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance was a tablespoon of seed. We now have thousands of pounds of these seeds. Here is lentils that came from Ladakh, from a village that I traveled. Lentils are extremely rare in Ladakh anymore because of subsidized lentils and garbanzos that are coming from chickpeas that are coming from India into this area of Kashmir. And so the growers have stopped growing lentils and things. And so these lentils are almost extinct. And I'm excited to say that we've been intercropping these with our heritage grains. We've also been growing them with flax and mustards. And so this is one of our growers here. So in this partnership, what we ask for is 15 to 20% of the seed back. That helps us perpetuate the seed library. And we have local grain millers that are interested in these grains growing that we're growing to mill them into flour. And a lot of them have like deeper purple, deeper black, the beta glucans and anthocyanin content in the grain. And so I'm really excited that we are doing this work for greater nutrient density in our food and for greater resiliency on the farm. Thank you.
Chris, thank you so much. I'll just say, being married to a farmer, I love Seed Geeks. He's an absolute, like, just immaculate seed geek. And I appreciate so much the passion and enthusiasm for the beauty of these grains, these seeds, and the magic really of, I mean, seeds are our heritage, just like our children, in my opinion. Like, when you cultivate them and you preserve them and nurture them and care for them, they just are bountiful and they are the future. And so I really appreciate the care and the cooperation around keeping seed heritage alive, and how valuable and vital it is, especially in a obviously industrialized complex where seeds are threatened. Seed sovereignty and the rich heritage of biodiversity of seed is just a really powerful act, honestly, of liberation and continuum of a way of being on the earth that connects us to the ancient lineage. So I'm just thrilled that you're thrilled by the work you're doing. And it was really actually lovely to have you show, because they're such beautiful grains. So really appreciate the work you're doing, and thanks for sharing today. Yeah, the immaculate seed geek. It's a thing. Like, his entire room is filled with seeds, and he's very careful with the seeds, dirty with his hands, careful with the seeds. Anyway, Chris, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to hand that over to Prishani Satyapal with sustainability truthing. I think that Prishani has to go here pretty soon, so I want to have her have the opportunity to share. I don't want her to miss that. Prishani, are you available to jump in now?
Hi, good morning. I am. I hope you're able to see me. Hi, everyone. I also appreciate you moving the schedule around. I'm going to put up a couple of slides, and I hope this works seamlessly. Yeah. So I am from South Africa. And I work across many different spaces, but I have for many years been working in very rural environments, particularly as part of my work with companies in the extractive sector, and working with communities who experience the impact of the extractive sector in their lives. And so I was looking for something that would help change that narrative of what very often happens in the extractive sector, where people go into these beautiful rural environments and change the relationship people have with land. I've seen across Africa, Asia, the Americas, Australia, these places that were completely dependent on the extractive business, whether it was mining or oil and gas. And yet, if I looked away from the actual extractive industry, I ended up seeing these beautiful landscapes, but none of the landscape was focused on productive capacity in terms of food. And this is consistent in most of these areas where mining occurs. So,
Prishani, I just wanted to stop for one moment, only to say that I
yes.
think there's a little, we see your screen, but it's a little tricky to see the slides in the current presentation mode that you had. And I think people are deeply wanting to see a little bit more. If there's a way to make it bigger, or yeah, so that's a full screen and that's a little easier to see the slides a bit. Does that
Just
help?
a little easier?
I saw some squinting trying to really see your, yeah, this is better, thank you.
Okay, good. So are you able to see, sorry, I'm using a borrowed computer. My computer was
That's
slow.
okay. Yeah, I heard about that. I'm sorry. Yeah, so what we see is the title screen now, but it's in the full
Okay.
size. So if you wanted to advance from here, that would be easier for everybody to track what you're sharing. Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Okay, no problem. So I'm just talking for now with the second background. So in essence, we're looking for something that would create food security, would create space for people to thrive beyond the almost takeover of the extractive sector in so many of these spaces. Parallel to that, my father has been in farming for most of his life. We also had a fruit and vegetable shop. We run different wholesale businesses. But the farm has always been a part of who we are, and producing food is kind of essentially part of our DNA. But we were experiencing, parallel to my experiences in the mining industry, we were experiencing the effects of conventional farming on this land. And through our studies, through the work we were doing, knew that we had an opportunity to change the story. So this is my brother Shakti. He's committed over the last 2 years to create a model that we can take into communities in not only the extractive sector, but in other spaces. I've had many people talk today about land not being a problem, or that you can take education into spaces. We have land in South Africa and across the African continent. Access is challenging sometimes. But the ability for people to take the knowledge of climate smart and regenerative farming, to understand that's the gap that we've been focusing on. So in the transition, we're focusing on how does we can create a model, first of all, that works in, this is a 40-hectare farm, and also that works in communities that of color in South Africa, and many of you may know our history. So to change the narrative about where farming is accessible and how these new skills can be brought into communities. So what we did, and like I said, this is Shakti's story that I'm sharing. He's taken the farm through this transition process, and really, as many of you on the call may know, moved away from the degenerative model to a regenerative model, and created a space that is transformative in many respects. The main learnings we've had is being able to take not only the people within our farm, but people around us into this journey of what the produce, what the ecosystem, what the processes of regenerative farming can look like, but also to make it accessible to communities who are generally or have been marginalized in the South African construct. So we're in this process now of transition. The land was rested for 2 years. It was an extraordinary process of seeing biodiversity return, and that process of regeneration has been, or transition, sorry, has been one of deep learning, but also a deep investment to hold a production up for that time it has been a different experience in terms of understanding how to manage finances. But through that process, we've started to build soil, increase biodiversity, and then just manage the whole process of training new communities and our employees into this new way of farming, bringing on new people into the farm. So this model is really something that speaks to what is the extensive large-scale farming ideology we have in South Africa. Farming was by and large and is highly subsidized. Large-scale farming is highly subsidized, but is industrial, and the whole movement towards regenerative is not accessible, or is difficult to get access to if you're having come from an environment where land and the subsidies are available to you. So this is part of our team. We brought in people to help train and take the team into this new space. Part of what we're doing is bringing in younger people into the farm, and we have young, passionate trainee farmers who are helping to break this narrative about who is a farmer and who can farm and what farming can look like for people. So some of the training we've done on the farm and workshops that we've run. But in essence, we've gone from a process of having a farm that was tired, the land wasn't producing, we went through a process of resting, and now have this place that is thriving. We have extensive school groups and other farmers coming into the farm for training, and that's really what I started off saying is our ultimate goal, is to be able to take this model and replicate it around the country and other parts of the African continent, but also to bring people to the farm for training. We have an accessible model that we can share with people and build the knowledge of how it is we can improve food security. Remember, I started off talking about spaces where land has been degenerated through the extractive sector, and it's going into spaces where people need access to food security, but also knowledge around the food systems that will enable us to withstand the impacts of climate change. So I'll stop the share there and just hopefully magically come onto the screen. I think that's worked. The process of what we've done over the last few months, well, few years actually, has helped us not only develop something in both for our own learning processes, but we've been engaging with groups in terms of how it is we can take these models into different places. And Geoffrey, I'd love to have a chat with you, for example, because ultimately, if we're not able to empower people with food security, with the knowledge around being able to transition, but in a way that's accessible to people, there's going to be a further imposition of almost a colonial mindset around regenerative agriculture. And I mean it when I say that, I'm not going to say that apologetically. Regenerative agriculture cannot be something that is brought in and imposed on people. People need to be able to understand it and feel the soil and reconnect with what's important to them now. So that's the process we've been following in terms of really getting the communities around us, the people we're working with, to be able to understand what it is we're doing. And when we're speaking about this, we're speaking about it as something we've undertaken and understand the pressure points in how to do this. But in hearing people speak about access to seeds, access to different technology, networks, farming is a lonely business. I don't need to say that to any of you on the screen who are in farming, but it is also one that is a labor of love. And so the more there is networks, the more there's ideas around access to financing, the more we're able to make the world a place that people are able to take care of their own future. So thank you very much for the time that I've been able to share.
Prishani, it's absolutely beautiful work. And I'm so grateful that we got you here, even with the tech challenges you were having to share. One thing that really stood out for me is the idea of we're growing farmers to grow the seed. There's something about the growing of farmers and the beauty of that relationship. That's really what stood out for me, was these are relationships and the fertility of the land. And then it was named in the chat as well, sort of this deep connection, abiding connection of people in place. It's inseparable. Even if you've forgotten and you've disconnected that inherent connection with the living world, it's still the most insentient part of our being is really connected with the living world. And there's something about sort of remembering and taking the layers of modernity off in some ways and just reforging reciprocity. And when we are reciprocal, the earth gives back so much bounty. And when we give again, it gives back. And it's so vital that this already isn't like and I appreciate that you also really went into the transitions. This is a very much like from conventional to the transition zone to regenerative. And there's very, tactical and real aspects of the economic situations, the social political situations. And, I just want to name that underneath that, what's really struck to me was it's about relationships. It's about reciprocity, and that is accessible to each of us if we find our way through those barriers and those challenges. It's right there, and it's always been there, and it's always here. And it's the thing I think that actually is going to sustain or regenerate us for future generations, is the relationship with a living earth that's changing, and that we have to adapt and sort of be in a rapport with a very changing, shifting planet. So I just really appreciate what you've shared. It brought me home back again to sort of the soil being of growing ourselves to be, tenders and caretakers of earth. So really beautiful work. Please do share any links that you have to your work in the chat. I know that you'll have to go soon, but any way that people can continue to follow up or connect here on this forum, that's what we're in service to, is helping each other be learners. And seeing these other models inspires us to what can we do in our own lands. So thank you, Prishani, for sharing. I really appreciate it. With that, I was going to hand that. Joshua, are you currently ready? If not, I'm going to go to my friend Nathan, who's I was thinking up next, unless Joshua, you're ready.
Sure, I'm ready.
Okay, so Josh Hughes is calling in a dear friend of mine who's got Verde Energia, originally from Oregon, but has been in Costa Rica for, I think, Josh, you've been down there at least 15 years at this point. So please go ahead and share. And then Nathan, I'm going to have you go next. Thanks,
Sure.
Josh.
Hi, everyone. So I had a lot to say that the other speakers have said brilliantly. We all face the same challenges and have the same opportunities when we try to get into food, I believe. I'm in Central America right now. I'm sitting in Oregon. I'm kind of cold. I just got back from 3 weeks in the jungle. I'm freezing. But I second everything they were saying, and I'm really appreciative of all the work that's going on there. And it's kind of changed the way I want to talk this morning a little bit, because I don't want to rehash what they've done so nicely. You said earlier the words resilience, and justice, and access. And those were the words that were constantly in the front of my mind and constantly in the front of my heart whenever I was thinking about this when I was younger, when I first met Jamaica, when we started hanging out in the 2000s. I was in this moment in my life of investing countless hours in the dream and then the protest, and then licking my wounds and trying to figure out what to do next to try and change things. And being pepper sprayed wasn't the thing I really wanted as an end result every time I tried to change things. Being arrested isn't going to change the world. It changed me, trying to stand in the way of bad ideas up here in Oregon, whether they were the ideas of war and the energy it takes to run our food systems. Somebody told me years ago that our soil was just a medium holding plants in place for petroleum to grow them, and it really hurt me. And it hurt my ideas of how my daughter and how all of our daughters and sons and children would ever have a relationship with a beautiful earth and a beautiful forest, if that was true. So all of my activism led me into food, and it led me into the battle cry to try and save forests and rebuild the food system. So I found a group of people that wanted to do that together. And in 2005, a bunch of us did a collective land purchase in Costa Rica. We bought in the middle of an area that was truly destroyed from stem to stern, called Puriscal, and it was a very bad example of how forestry had been done. Costa Rica has a lot of lofty goals and is a very green country, but it also had It wasn't fortified to deal with private power in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And the bigger food companies came down there and really ravaged the forest, and food companies and tobacco companies, and kind of left us with a totally denuded area that's beautifully steep, and it all washed away. And the communities were washing away too when I got there. Urbanization was in full effect. So as Jamaica mentioned, our little project started there, 20 acres, called Verde Energia. And I didn't know what to do, but I did know that I needed to plant trees and I needed to do something to bring back soil. So we planted a lot of trees, a couple million trees with our neighbors in the first years. And then I observed and listened to what was happening in the community and listened to what was happening in the forest. And I literally heard the birds return and the bugs return. Nature responded so quickly in an area where you get 20 feet of rain a year. Trees grow so fast that my personality type is kind of turned all the way up, if you know me. And to go and like watch trees grow, I didn't know how I'd deal with that. But it rained so much and the jungle was so giving that I learned that life was really going to rip if we let it. And mostly what I did with my community was just take our foot off of nature's throat, and it just exploded. And so all of my ideas and best ideas really were coming to a head, and I was tapping in a lot to the silence of the forest and the noise of the forest. And I was partially raised by Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street. They taught me very important things. They taught me to share, to consider other people, to be kind, and spread love, and animals and plants included in all of that, other people remark. And as I raised my daughter in this beautiful environment, I wondered if those lessons were just for her. They're made with puppets and stuff, but they're definitely not just for her. They were made for me. As I got into designing the systems that we saw that were needed in our area, and that means trying to bring back food production, trying to bring back soil, I saw how important sharing was. And we've talked a lot today about tactics and permaculture, and all great tactics to deploy for this. And for me and my people, we really had to figure out how to rebuild the model to do all this. So we leaned in hard into collective ownership. We leaned in hard into collective management. It means with everyone from employees that work with you to the investors that we find to help do this. And I think that's the key to what we've been doing, is that we own it together and our community owns it together. And so we lean in very hard into this, and we change the world in our little village by vesting everyone that's doing this together. And I got to say, it's changed things rather quickly. I've been there 17 years now. The kids are staying. They're working in these projects. We can talk about how awesome it is to change to regenerative farming, but farming in most of the world makes slaves of people. It's really tragic, and it's not something most of our children are going to strive for. So like, we really do have to reinvent the way it's all owned, the way the profits are made. So, you know, as we invest in this, as my quasi-privileged friends and family, I grew up in a kind of white trash, or we grew up in a wrecking yard. So I didn't come from a lot of money at all. But I still share what I have. And so when I bought land, I shared it. I shared it with the employees. I shared it immediately with the people that were going to do this with me. And I think, you know, as we see the average farmer's age in the US, I believe is 60 or older right now. Our food systems aren't heading towards a place where we own them collectively. They're heading more and more into a couple of companies' hands. And it's not because farming isn't fun or innovative or not cool. It's all those things. It's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, getting into building soil and trees and making my own peanut butter the first time was like a dream come true for an American boy, from my own peanuts. And it just hasn't really been worth trading your time for. As you go through the education system, you end up working for these huge companies to get more chemicals in the ground. That's not really my neighbor's dream. So collective ownership, collective and cooperative action and investment is where Black Sheep and my team leans in the most. Our little farm quickly identified, and with our neighbors after observing for years, where the gaps were in how we could compete or get products to the world, with these best practices being at the forefront, like not using chemicals and using as much low in nature and human tech as possible, integrated with things like the forest. and considering all these different bottom lines that we'd hope to have included in our business models of the future. We just started doing that from the beginning, and it's not profitable financially for a while. So it really does require us thinking about sharing and gifting back. The regeneration is going to require a lot of money and effort. Where now I chose an area where it's kind of an accelerated model, just because I have spring year round. So I've developed a deep faith in these things. I've got to see it work. And yeah, I see that the systems that the regenerative actions aren't rocket science. It's something that the bigger companies can do. It's something that governments will do eventually as they realize that peak topsoil is more important than peak oil. There's not a lot to replace soil with. But if we continue to have centralized systems and ownership of those things, we're going to fall into all these same traps. We're going to fall into the same progress traps we've done now. We saw current agriculture systems as a way to get away from the feast and famine model. We find ourselves in traps where the future pays for all of our mistakes. We don't want to do that again. So I think having us own it, having absentee ownership become a thing of the past. You can have absentee investment class that wants to help from abroad, but local ownership of things where people can always take into account those things that we call the bottom line, but my neighbors call access to the hospital, because the road doesn't slide away because there's enough trees holding it up and the erosion's under control, or access to clean drinking water locally and realistically, not just some things you see on a petition once in a while. So I think there's a ton of, we have amazing results on the ground. I welcome you all to come check out what we do at Black Sheep and at Rewild Organics. Just after seeing these other projects this morning, I don't need to show you more pictures of the jungle coming back. It is, but the community is how these things will last. And we need to lean into that hard. And that's going to require us tapping into sharing and gifting these things back into health. It's not going to happen magically. So I love you all, and thank you for doing this work.
Thanks so much, Josh. Please do put your web links in the chat. Josh and I met, I think I'm going to be 45 soon. Josh and I met when we were very young, in our 20s, and raised our children together. And I've had the good fortune of having my feet on the soil, watching from the beginning, and then going back over time to see the transformation of the lands that you're speaking of. And it's profound. In some ways, 15 to 20 years feels like a really long time, but in a lot of ways it's not, to watch what happened from a very cattle raised area when I first came to visit, and you've only been there maybe 2 years or so, to now. It's just incredible, and it does, show the cascading, rippling benefits index. Our friend George Orbelian, who's on the boards of everything, Buckminster Fuller, Kinship Earth, everything, talks a lot about the cascading benefit index. When we start the cycle of repair and restoration and reciprocity and relationship, you just see the earth will take, like you said, if you sort of get your throat, your foot off the throat, the earth just takes that abundance and continues to, maybe wildly and in ways that are volatile to us, but undulates itself, reawakens itself alive when given the opportunity simply to thrive. And so that, I think, provides a lot of hopefulness, even though there's a lot of challenge and very realistic constraint and harm and concern and degradation. I also have seen, and all of you here are examples of, and you're just a smattering of the incredible work I'm so privileged to hear every day, the repair, the restoration, the renewal, the regeneration that is actively occurring. And it's very hopeful that if we just sort of start realigning with natural living systems, this isn't a irresolvable challenge. This is something we simply have to decide. And now, like, yesterday, but now, to turn ourselves towards and to do the work to realign and get uncomfortable with our existing status quo, to disrupt existing systems of extraction, oppression, to move ourselves towards systems that are life affirming. It's not that it's not an uncomfortable transition at times, but it's a necessary and possible one. And the earth responds to that when we're responsive to what's being asked right now. So Josh, I really respect the work you've done, and please do feel free to shamelessly plug it in the chat.
By the way, it's been fun. it's all fun too. I've had thousands of people
Yeah.
come plant trees with me. I've been learning and then teaching everything and paying it forward with a huge crew of people that care. And one thing I've learned diving in with both feet into the permaculture world and into just into this regenerative world is that you're not alone. It feels like it when you're struggling, maybe locally, you're fighting an issue, you're yelling locally, you're protesting, you're doing whatever you do, trying to we call them manifestations in Costa Rica, not protests. So yeah, it's working. It's working at the same time while other things are falling apart. I'm watching whole corridors come back to life, jaguars returning while we're producing hundreds of tons of food and herbs for the world, and even building materials. I went from locking myself to trees in Oregon to lovingly choosing trees that pioneer and bring back forests and then building furniture out of them. So I've learned if I can learn and I can change and I can do it with my little crew. I don't know why we all can't. It's not rocket science, but it is fun to try and work together. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Shashi. Deeply appreciate your work, friends. And with that, I want to hand it to another friend, Nathan Liu, calling in from Southern California, representing the Mongol tribe. And Nathan, your work is also so dynamic and so community-centered, and you're such a craftsman, really, of so many parts of the trade. And I'm really looking forward to you sharing about your work today. Thank you so much, Josh. And Nathan, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I love that we have this platform to help connect us all. It's such a beautiful thing. And so I'm really happy to share this. I'm going to share my screen. Everyone see that all right? Okay, great. So like Jamaica said, I'm based out of Southern California. I'm in San Diego County. I grew up, born and raised here in San Diego, and I have a project here in Palomar Mountain. A few years ago, I started a nonprofit organization called Mongol Tribe. Our focus is bridging health and wellness and civic ecology. And basically, this kind of was born out of just a need to myceliate. And I found that in our community, both in the nonprofit world and in the the ecology world, that there's such siloing and fragmentation. And so I really, this whole gathering aspect is been the foundation of this, just to connect people and resources and community. So so my background is in natural resource management. I studied at Oregon State, and I also studied at Yuba College, which is in Northern California, for my agriculture degree. And then I am active in the the food community, and sit on a board of Slow Food, which is has been really interesting because the connection to Arc of Taste, and I loved hearing about all the seeds. I'm really excited to connect more about the biodiversity that we can implement in these various strategies. And then I just recently joined the board of Transition US, and am excited to connect because the ability for us to create these regenerative networks and interweave each other's practices is going to be how we can implement and apply more rapidly. And so I started looking into my heritage more, and found that there's in Southeast Asia, which is most of my background, forestry and silviculture and earth management has just been part of who we are. And so our indigenous knowledge mine comes from all over the regions, from the islands and the coastal systems up the whole montane into the plains and across larger spaces. And then my projects and progress has been to become an arborist and a forester. And this training has kind of started with urban orcharding. And so food sovereignty, seed sovereignty has become kind of my foundation of why I started these projects. So here, basically my 3 programs, and these all kind of are in various stages of application. Food and medicine sovereignty, we've been supporting seed library development, and in the process of implementing edible arboretums into our public park systems, and really looking at how do we manage our wildland urban interfaces in these riparian zones and throughout our various canyons that we have here in Southern California. And then, that relationship with human is so important. So regenerative agriculture and natural farming are really a critical piece of this transition. And San Diego is actually has the most farms per county in the country, and the most organic farms per county. And most of them are small, like less than 10 acres. So it's really kind of unique fruit trees and specialty agriculture. And then the natural land management program was kind of evolved from this need to bridge out into the open spaces. So the connection to traditional ecological knowledge and regenerative land management practices, there surfaced this need, right? That we have to respond to fire, and our soils are being depleted, our water holding capacity is being reduced, the recharge rate is significantly lower than what our extract rate is. So how do we go through this process of getting the rain to fall again in areas where it's passing over and flooding the desert, right? So silviculture and shepherding are kind of key pieces in that. Beekeeping is kind of woven into this, so I loved hearing about that. Mushroom farming. And so then we wrapped into the social component of holistic health and wellness, because community resilience is related to watershed resilience. Nutrition is related to our land health. The meditation and personal well-being is fundamental for our ability to contribute and exchange our energy as part of this nurturance and care of presence in the land. So we found that it's so important for all of these to weave together, because without it, there's missing pieces. So I'm going to highlight the natural land management program and tell you guys a little bit more about that. Basically, we have this 67-acre ranch in Palomar Mountain, oak woodland, and it's hyper dense. Too many trees, and a lot of shrubs that have been fire adapted. So we started a project this spring where we're applying silviculture to reduce some of the fuel loads in the lower canopies, and especially a lot of the shrubs, and subsequently open up the floor underneath the oak trees. The oaks in our area are currently struggling with a variety of things. Drought has obviously impacted them, but even more so, we have issues with various beetles, and these beetles are causing the trees to appear drought stressed at times, which then calls other beetles to them and causes them to die. So the process has been really an interesting experience for me, because as I'm working the land, I'm realizing that there's such a need for management, right? Application of care, right, is really what it comes to. Application of care I like, because we actually have to work the land and find out what's there, witness it first, see what it needs. And oaks and oak forests as a whole have developed only in the last 10 to 15,000 years with the application of care that indigenous communities have supported in them, with acorns and with those gathering of resources from them. So I kind of see them as some of our first orchards, right? And so this is kind of what we're looking at here on the left. You see this picture of, this is woodpecker damage, where it's seeking out this larvae that has embedded itself between the cambium layer and the bark. And so this creature has a 1-year lifespan, and the trees can, support having quite a few of them in them for a numerous amount of years, 8 to 10 years, without seeing a lot of overall health decline. But this one you can see on the right is standing dead. This one had quite a few beetles in it, and it just couldn't handle it between the fire and the other stressors. And so we have a lot of trees like this that are standing dead. And then this one on the left of the one that's dead, you can see is very sparse in its canopy. That's a lot of our other trees right now are very sparse in their canopy and are needing to come down. These trees can live 300 to 400 years. We right now have coast live oak and canyon live oak, and black oak and Engelmann oak are slightly higher elevation than us, but mostly the coast live oak are really the ones struggling with these beetles. So right now what we're doing is we have a research project that we are being funded through the Resource Conservation District via Prop 84, the CAL FIRE funding. And so we are applying silviculture management to a 4-acre project parcel within our 67-acre site. And basically the fuel load reduction is the main focus, while also inventorying and looking for beetles. So what I'm doing is I have a GIS surveying tool, and I'm walking the land and doing vegetative plant surveys, primarily focused on trees and relevant, ethnobotanically relevant species, trees and shrubs, and these unique species that are used by the indigenous community, edible plants and medicines. And in this process, we're also then clearing the way so that our second phase can incorporate the rotational grazing. We selected the Navajo Churro sheep They're the closest to our landrace sheep that we have, and they have a really special wool that's very low crimp, practically crimpless, and they are super hardy from the desert animals, and they do great on browse. So we're figuring out how much we can supplement their feed without having to bring in externals, because with the grain shortages for feed and just we're up the mountain, up the grade, so it's a quite a drive to get up the hill. So everything we can do on site is much more impactful and effective for us. And then we're looking to address this idea of farming the forest, right? That these oaks are beautiful and they have the potential of being able to give us so many resources. And so we're looking to mill them if there's quality millable material. We're going to be doing mushroom log inoculations, biochar, and we're, firewood and mulch are kind of our last product down the line. So this process is going to be something where we're researching kind of the affordability of applying management while also generating secondary added value goods, obviously in addition to wool and milk and cheese down the line. And so then obviously the key piece I think a lot of these presentations I've shared is we need to have community engagement. So we offer monthly camp out weekends where we have a 7-acre campground, and it's a beautiful facility for hosting events. And so we invite community to come join us and camp for a weekend, a volunteer weekend, where they can help us with various projects on site. So our first weekend, we planted this mother orchard, 11 fruit trees that are all easily taken from cuttings, figs, pomegranates, mulberries, goji berry, and some caneberries. And then the most recent weekend, we built this paddock, and just in time for the storms, and we're able to support our sheep in that introduction to the land. And then this is our goals now are moving into a TEK apprenticeship program. I recently met with a colleague, Ali, up in Chico, and she's operates Chico TEK, and they're doing wetland restoration projects and using traditional knowledge to care for the land, incorporating cultural burning. So we're really looking on our site to be doing these research projects that we can incorporate traditional management to, find that balance of access to the land and support for our mutual well-being. And so additionally, knowing that we need to train and facilitate educational opportunities to learn about how to do these things, to put our hands in the earth and, harvest the rishis, and, go through this process, right, of healing, within ourselves through these practices. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. And I want to acknowledge Dr. Shiva and all her work. And, that's been an inspiration for me is this, the biggest things we can do for humanity is working with the soils. And for me, that connects with the water. And so I know part of my purpose and role in this presence is to support the restoration and healing of watersheds. And so this is where, we've really moved into this place of finding that alignment. And this practice is such a foundation of how to support that. And traditional knowledge is showing us that, cultural burning is more complex than people realize. There's a lot of these, biological fungal systems and secondary responses that trees apply to pull water to the surface. There's so much depth to this that is just known by our communities because this is how we've been doing it. And so we're looking for more support to do these things. Obviously, funding is one of our biggest challenges. So, please reach out. We're always looking for ways to connect. And happy to share. Thank you so much.
Nathan, I adore you and appreciate you so much. It's just such beautiful work. And I know we met again also many years ago, but I've spent time in Santa Barbara many a time. I've produced event down there for now going on 10 years. And the oaks of that region, last year we had the opportunity to take volunteer efforts and help restore this oakland savanna on an event venue that we've been gathering for 10 years. And we both have a friend in common, a local Chumash woman named Carmen Sandoval, who will be on a panel on restoring planetary reciprocity tomorrow. But Carmen and the relationship of the traditional Chumash lands, the oak trees are the grandmothers. The oak trees and the people are the same. They don't see themselves as disconnected. The oak and people and lands are intertwined as a collective being body. And those oak savannas are amazing and immaculate and precious and old and ancient.
Yeah.
And to feel how the connection of that particular tree, the oak savanna that you're, restoring among the other beautiful work you're doing, that just stood out to me, because I've been on those lands, we've planted the babies. And I remember having a conversation with Carmen about the her tears in her eyes about basically us helping to replant the grandchildren of these ancient grandmother oak trees. And I just, not everybody has, we all have different ecologies that we're sharing here today in this global roundtable, all these different, jungles to grasslands to, South Africa to, all over the map, literally. But I do want to celebrate the unique beauty of each of these bioregions and the not only cultural heritage, but the very living expression of a dynamic earth. And the oaks, to me, hold such a memory of continuum. They haven't been forgotten, and they haven't forgotten the peoples who've always been sustained and nourished by those oaks. And it was real. I'll say this one last thing. It was really amazing to see where we were looking at these old oak trees, and Carmen talked about how you can see where literally thousands of years ago, these very old oaks, you can see where they were worked with to create a lower hanging, more accessible acorn harvest. And that, like, you can see, and I was sitting under this tree going, right here on this place, thousands of years ago, there was people tending this particular tree that now we're sitting under, as it grew, so that it's just, the connection is still alive. And I think that's part of what I appreciate about your work, is reweaving the fabric of connection, of place, of practice, but also of culture. So Nathan, thank you so much for your beautiful work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's I appreciate that reflection too, because it's it's so important to have that connection with the community and the spaces, because then that like learning can unfold, right? The story can be told. And that's one of the things I love about the site we're on, is that it has metates where the community is to sit and grind. And it's great, like those connections. And so thank you so much for the weaving that you're doing.
Yeah,
too.
I've been to the rocks where they still have the little sort of almost mortar pestle imprints where they would grind and they would sing. And it's just a beautiful connection. So,
and some of them are so deep, like 12 inches deep in the space. So you can, it takes forever for it to get to that. So you can, like you said, the feeling, that's the part that I want to remind people that this is about feeling. Right, that we have to feel into it, because the land, and when we're connected, it's like, hey, this is what I need. That forest can sustain itself, but it's like, look, there's too many of us. It's taking too much water to hold it up. We have to bring that back to the earth and put it into work. We have to capture that carbon in another way, and we have to feed ourselves just like we feed the earth, so that cycle can continue. So, it's definitely, it's all a balance, but we have to feel into it, and community is everything.
Yeah, Nathan, thank you so much. Such a rich session today. This is definitely, I think, with the roundtables, we thought, 2 hours, we'll have time for discussion. I think that the discussion is going to be in the chat, because I still have 3 projects that I'm very excited to make sure that we hear from today. But I appreciate all of you that have been listening and hopefully learning and being re-inspired and engaged by this session. I do want to welcome up next, we'll have Dan Ward from Wales Transition Lab and North Star Transition. Next will be Cindy Tolle from Evergreen Ranching. And then we're going to round the day with our friends from Nourish, Hawai'i, Aram, Armstrong, and Kirk Bergstrom will be our final presentation for the day. But Dan, please go ahead and share. And let's try the next 3 panelists. Let's see if we can try to make sure we get everybody in with at least 7 minutes or so each. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jamaica, and great to be here, guys. Really great listening to all the talk so far. Really interesting stuff, and it really strikes me actually the parallels, the similarities. Like, it doesn't matter where you are in the world; it's the same challenges, and it's the same here in Wales where I am. So I'm from Dan Ward, North Star Transition. I'm in Wales, in the capital, in Cardiff at the moment, which for those of you who don't know, is about 2 hours from London to the west. Wales is about 200 miles, it's its own country, it's 200 miles long, 150 miles wide, pretty small on the global scale, but it got some interesting things here. So I'll start sharing my screen, get a little presentation for you. Just give me, is that, oh, there we go. Hopefully that's coming through. All good? Okay, so I'm here to talk about Wales Transition Lab. So, I'll give you a little bit of background on North Star Transition first. So we're Unfortunately, it's hard to follow all these farmers. I'm not a farmer. I've got a couple of chickens and some vegetables in the garden, but I try and put my little patch. But we're trying to create that space in terms of how do we, at a systemic level, right? So we work to accelerate systems change, and we're kind of like a think and do tank with the focus on the doing. So and how do we tackle these systemic problems? So we have climate, biodiversity problems, human well-being, food, food, and food's a big part of that, and agriculture. But a lot of the attempts to solve those problems are in these silos, as been mentioned, and we work to kind of bring those silos together and create systemic change. So to do in that aim, we set Wales Transition Lab. Now, Wales, so it's got its own government, devolved from the UK government, and we've got some really interesting policies here. So we've got a Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. So Welsh Government and the public bodies in Wales, so the Health Service and so on, they have a duty to think about future generations in their policy and to think about the environment and so on. And that creates quite an interesting, so we thought, this is a good, and it's not too big, so 3 million people, not too big, not too small. It's a nice size to think, okay, at a national scale, how could we actually really make change here? And so we pulled together Wales Transition Lab to have that conversation really and think of, okay, if we were going to make Wales if we're going to transform Wales systemically, what would that look like? And we brought together a load of range of stakeholders. I think we've got over 40 organizations and representatives of them involved, to think, okay, well, and we identified these kind of 4 key areas, ambitions for a healthy Wales, to have a healthy land, air and water, supporting nature and biodiversity and communities and so on, having a food system which is optimized for what the well-being of citizens. So that food is delivering a healthy food that's got nutrition, it's helping it's locally sourced, it's part of that local economy, it's helping nature and biodiversity, it's not adding to pollution and so on, and entwined within those culture and community and so on are really important as well. Wales has its own language, Welsh, those types of things are really important. And but how do we get there? So okay, we've got these ambitions, how do we go forwards? And we've developed this kind of model, and we work very closely with University College London's Climate Action Unit, who are just master engagers of people and creating space to have those conversations and enable change. And I think a lot of the time people jump straight into they try to get straight to solutions, and actually you really need to understand what are the problems first. So in the Transition Lab, we bring people together from across lots of different areas, from farming, from finance, from health, and from education and so on. And together, spend quite a lot of time just understanding where the problems are, what are each other's problems, and developing an empathy for each other's problems as well. So we understand and can empathize with, this is why those people make these choices. It's not because no one wants to pollute the river, but it's a legacy problem from the system has created these problems. And then together we go, okay, if we're going to do things differently, what would that look like? And then we can start to identify solutions and move through that. And of course, then we rinse and repeat, because actually, as we go forwards, it's quite iterative. We're going to keep having to identify. We're going to keep coming up against problems and barriers that are systemic. We have to readdress those things and bring people in and so on. Keep having those conversations. So we've been doing that, and that led to some projects. So because people who were part of the lab, off the back of this, were thinking, okay, yeah, actually, these are things that these are issues that we want to look at. So we've got health boards here, and they think, okay, how would we don't actually think about food yet as part of health, which you would think would be an obvious thing to do, but it just but going forward, it's like, okay, how could we actually put food in as part of our work on health, for example? How do we get more local food that's going to be healthy for patients? How do we, what's our role in that? And so, and how do you make sure that that food is also having a regenerative effect on the land and so on? So we help the people understand that, and putting that into the, starting to get people into the space where they can start to identify these challenges. And you get some really interesting problems. So people think that, so for example, one of the barriers we found, that Wales grows a lot of sheep. We have a lot of sheep and a lot of lamb. It's a bit of a problem actually. We have a lot of overgrazing, but it's still better than importing sheep from New Zealand and Australia. But the reason we can't use that in the local hospitals is because actually it goes right. We have to get people together from right across the system, from the chefs, the dietitians, from procurement, all the way through to farmers and wholesalers. And what we found was, even if you had great regenerative farming, they still couldn't sell it to the NHS because the recipe spec has said, oh, actually it needs to be a big lump of lamb that Wales doesn't make because Welsh lamb is smaller because it's grown on hills. So it's like, again, really understand those challenges. I'm going to blast through now because I know I don't want to take too much time. And then moving forwards, we've really identified, we're taking the kind of learning from these projects, and we're taking this and applying these now, putting this into action, into how can we really start to change how health boards pay for food, making sure that it's, how can they increase the amount that's locally grown? How can we make sure that it's like organic and having a positive impact? How can we scale that across different bodies, from health and schools and social care, prisons and so on, and think about how all that combines together. And then how do we expand that at a national level across Wales? And then also at a landscape, more active on the landscape side, with the River Wye, is a really famous river here in the UK. It's got a lot of problems. It's polluted from fertilizers and chicken farms, from manure. And to change that, well, there's 4,500 farmers in that catchment alone, and maybe it would cost them £1 billion, $1.6 billion, or maybe 1.2 at the moment, to change that. So, and then bringing finance into that conversation as well, to think about how we move these things forward through that Wales Transition Lab model. And I think one of the things that we say is it's a small step, it's a journey. We can't say what the end result is going to be or exactly when we'll get there, and we just have to work there together and keep collaborating, and we'll get there, really. So yeah, very thanks for having me along, and great to make all these connections.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jan. Make sure to put your info in the chat there as well. But definitely, like you said, moving around, sort of looking at very rural areas, multi-country perspectives about this concept of transition. And I've seen now a couple, I know that Prishani shared as well, this process between sort of where we are with conventional ag and how the process to how we get there is actually something that a lot of us are deeply steeped in. How it's not just about making a leap to a more idyllic version. Some people can do that, and those are incredible examples of I just made the leap, as someone like Josh just made the leap. But also there's work to be done in the steps to take to move towards something, in the process of transition that happens. So a lot of your work and the work of others here today is about those processes. I know later we're going to hear from Kirk Bergstrom, who's also in Nourish Hawai'i, looking at transforming food systems. So I appreciate deeply the work you're doing, and really make sure that you pop your stuff in the chat so that people can get a hold of you, who are also looking at how to take a bioregional approach to those transition processes. So deeply appreciate your share today. And we are, with that, going to hand it over really quickly to Cindy and then to Kirk. And I think we can take we'll see what we can do with the best of our time. Cindy, please go ahead and share. And then Kirk, I look forward to hearing you share as well.
Okay, let me see what I can do here about sharing my screen. Okay, let me go backwards here. Sorry, I'm having some difficulties here. I need to start at the top. Okay, so I am Cindy Tolle with Evergreen Ranching and Livestock, and I also have Evergreen Specialty Foods. And what I do is basically supply primarily meat proteins to a 10-state region from the Midwest to the West in the United States. It's been really interesting listening to the talks this morning. We all have very common issues and very common solutions. So that's really awesome. And hopefully I can provide some insight as to what I'm doing and contribute. All right, so basically this is the US. The areas we operate are there in color. I have 3 hubs currently, and we're probably going to expand to more. One is in South Dakota, in the blue hub. Another one is down in central or southeastern Arizona in the green kind of corridor. And then I've got a project location in Kansas City. And there, ironically, not ironically, but I collaborate with Dan Krull, who you just heard from, and Bob Berkebile, and Mark Beam, who you heard from yesterday, and we'll hear from again today. And then the center spot in yellow is areas where I partner with other projects. But essentially, our main focus is to make it easy for our customers to buy locally grown, responsible, clean, affordable food. And my side of it is kind of the meat proteins, but I collaborate with other producers that grow all kinds of stuff. So how did I get here? I'm an ecologist, I'm a mother, I'm a rancher, and so the land is really important to me. So I was looking around for programs to collaborate with and decided to work with the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program because I really like what they do. I like what they do on the land. I like what they do with humane harvesting of animals. And I really like just the focus of the program and their reach. So that being said, that was important to me because a lot of my lands are in grasslands that are problematic. Why are they problematic? Because to me, grassland birds are indicators of healthy ecosystems. There's a 53% decline in grassland birds, which is pretty huge. I mean, it just tells me that the land is really unhealthy. We all know that. But the real clincher in all of this is 95% of these grassland birds live on private ranches or farms or protected lands. So to me, it's really imperative and important to engage landowners and provide them with a way to generate revenue on their lands, to make it easy for them to make money and protect their land at the same time. So why is there decline in grassland, bird species? Obviously habitat loss to fragmentation for farming. We have a winter kill where they don't survive winter for a variety of reasons. And of course we have a lot of chemical use on the land that wasn't present, not too long ago. So let's look at birds, because birds are a really good indicator of health. I focus on the kind of right now in the green and the red zones here for the migratory bird flyways. This is the wintering ground and the breeding ground of these birds. So kind of right in the areas I operate, important to me. And then this right here is a map of the conservation ranching programs that Audubon is supporting. There's a lot. And so every little dot there is kind of the concentration of these programs. And I collaborate with a bunch of these producers. Okay, so again, you can see my overlap. So what I do is I aggregate producers and also my own animals and plants and fruits and whatever. And we get that into the marketplace. So here is essentially our vertical integration. And these are regional food hubs, essentially. So we have ranch or farm, a variety of different locations. We control our own processing, and then we get into the various markets. In all of those locations, not only do we produce food and we aggregate, but we also have educational programs and provide opportunities for beginning farmers and ranchers to get started as interns and then eventually owners of these landscapes. So how do we fund this? The ranches and farms in our network, we have some impact investors that help us buy the land. We regenerate it, we get it into production, and then it actually pays for itself. We got a healthy landscape, we can make money off it, and it's a win-win all the way along. Again, we have beginning opportunities for beginning ranchers and farmers, which is a huge deal because the cost, as we know, of getting into land these days is super expensive. So, for example, in our Arizona project, I've got a beginning farmer and rancher family that is a 10% owner of the landscape, and they couldn't have done that without the opportunity. And so they'll just continue to grow their equity in the project. But they also, they're living on the land. We've got all of our projects are like that. It just gives people an opportunity to make a living and a reason to stay on the land, which to me is really important. The other thing our project does is our markets can get supplied with a guaranteed supply, which is really important, as we saw during COVID with disruptions in the local food supply chains. This is a really great thing for our consumers. So let's talk about our market.
Yeah, I wanted to just note here that we want to make sure to have, I'm so sorry to squash everybody. We have another session starting soon. I want to make sure Kirk has a time to share Nourish Hawai'i as well, but would like to have you have the opportunity to kind of wrap some of your work. It's incredibly rich and I don't need to cut it off any shorter.
Oh, okay. No, I'll go fast. There's our markets, institutions, kind of standard markets. We regeneratively graze, grow clean meats, etc. And then our biggest deal is we have to educate the consumers. We all know this. And then I'll go ahead and skip through that. We all kind of know that. So again, this is protecting large landscapes. We all know the benefits with more biodiversity, water conservation, and carbon sequestration and other conservation factors. Now I'm going to cut it short, and there's my contact information if anybody wants to know more. And I'll be talking tomorrow about some restoration efforts, particularly in the southwestern US. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Cindy, so much. Yeah, please make sure to share your information in the chat as well. And again, certainly don't mean to cut you off, but I'm excited.
Oh, no, it's all good.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear more about your work tomorrow. And we have the eco restoration demonstration, which is going to be chock full of that bridge between obviously regenerative ag and eco restoration. They're so deeply connected. So thank you for your share. And I do want to hand it to our friend Kirk Bergstrom from Imagine World, who is at the pilot helm of the Nourish Hawai'i project. And Kirk, let's make the most of the time we have. We are going to extend this session by 2 minutes so that we can make sure to hear from Kirk, and then we'll go ahead and reset the room for the next session on funding from farm to table. But Kirk, please share as much as you can in the time that you have, and we look forward to hearing more.
Thank you, and it's been a real inspiration to hear from everyone today, and just a reminder of this network that is forming like a mycelial network where we can really be a community of practice in this work. So I'm going to take kind of a bird's eye view. I'll hitchhike off the last speaker and talk about some systems change and systems mapping work that we have been doing in the bioregion of Hawaii and with the state of Hawaii. And because time is short, I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to paste into chat some of these screens that I'll be sharing. So let me just bring up that. What I wanted to walk through is some examples of how we have helped to bring together multiple stakeholders to really reimagine the future food system of Hawaii. And our primary partner in Hawaii is an initiative called Transforming Hawaii's Food System Together, which is a 10-year initiative that's really looking at what that transformation will take. And so it connects a lot of issues, regenerative agriculture, biocultural restoration, public health, food security. So it really is a food system perspective. And we've been very interested in the question of how do you do systems change work? And we found that the system mapping process that we orchestrated for about 6 months was really valuable in terms of building connections among the multiple stakeholders, building trust, and really creating kind of a common roadmap into the future. So the screen you're looking at is on a system mapping platform called Nexial, and the link should be in chat. And I'm just going to show you a few examples of the work that has emerged from the system mapping that we've done. So for example, one of the things that we wanted to explore was what was the theory of change of the work that we were doing. And very quickly, particularly because we were intent on recognizing and centering the indigenous community and traditional knowledge of Hawaii, we really wanted to do a deep dive into the history of the food system. And so here on the left, you can see that what we're doing is beginning to define some of those eras. And then as I roll over, you can see over in the right-hand column there, we start to have a timeline that represents that rich history. And then we also did a very deep dive into root causes, where we asked the stakeholders to really reflect on how did these persistent problems really get us to the present, and what is it we have to deal with to reimagine the future. And then you'll see kind of a roadmap into the future with goals and metrics. We're very much looking at a state level food system planning process, building collaborative networks. So that is a big part of it. One of the things that's so important about these mapping projects is getting the stakeholders to see one another and their relationship with each other. So here's an example of a stakeholder system map, where we begin to look at what are the different groups and initiatives around the state. And this kind of breaks down into specific organizations and initiatives. The other thing that we really wanted to give some attention to is the idea of what would be the strategic interventions that would accelerate this food system transformation in Hawaii. And one of the things we recognized was you really do have to kind of simplify the larger basket of possible interventions. And so we gave ourselves kind of the goal of simplifying it to 5 to 7. And so here are 6 that we ended up choosing. And then the system mapping platform that we're using allows you to go into more detail. So if you click on the sub-interventions, you start to see more granularity. And what I think is helpful about this in terms of a multi-stakeholder process is that people can sort of look at this and say, oh, I think something's missing, or I would shift this or change this. But it starts to be a common dashboard for the conversation about the future that people want to create together. And then finally, I'm just going to show you this screen that we're calling planning elements and metrics. This is similar to the interventions in that we wanted to identify what would represent key planning areas. And this became kind of a roadmap to forming working groups, which are now working on things like action plans and policy recommendations. And this also kind of unpacks into more granularity. So there's actually 18 of these planning elements. And if I roll over something like ecological sustainability, you'll see in the right-hand column that we've identified metrics at a state level and then how they connect to the SDGs. So part of what we want to do in the work in Hawaii is show that it's nested in these global goals. Or here's something like biocultural restoration. So you see the state metrics and then the SDGs. So we view ourselves as being at a very early stage of cultivating this multi-stakeholder process and building a common vision for the state of Hawaii. If you're interested in learning more about our process, how we've orchestrated workshops, how we've been doing the system mapping, and then kind of what comes next, which is really a whole collaborative process built around working groups and convenings, we'd be delighted to talk to you further. So thanks so much.
Oh my goodness, Kirk, thank you so much. I was just saying in the chat, what beautiful, incredible work to see a system from this lens. I know there's the work that you guys are doing on the ground and engaging actively with community members and local stakeholders, yet this mapping that allows for visibility of something that has so many complex parts, so accessible and so beautiful to see your work. I'm remiss to have to squash it because I know that it's so much depth, but please do share the information in the chat. I would love for others to be able to reach out to Imagine World and the Nourish Hawaii project to learn more. And you guys are incredible facilitators of multi-stakeholder processes for other communities and efforts that are looking for that kind of support or consultation. I think that what they've done in Hawaii, my watching of the journey has been incredibly impressive. So if you're looking for that kind of support in the work that you're doing, definitely, Kirk, put your reach out information. Thank you to everybody for the patience today. I know we're a little bit into the next session, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity to kick off day 2 of the forum with just such inspiring, relevant, interesting, dynamic projects representing around the world. And I know this is only a tip of the iceberg of what this rich ecosystem and community is up to. So thank you for everybody's presence and patience today and listening. We are going to go ahead and stop the recording for this particular session.